Hi, I'm Melissa Fassel Dunn and welcome to Broad Appeal, a show about boss women and queen bees where we feature inspirational women who are writing and living by their own rules. Today we are talking to Eliza of ES Tutoring and Consulting. Welcome, Eliza.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So you've taught pretty much all over the place, from Montessori to Milton Academy to Boston University. Given your range of backgrounds, what was your favorite teaching experience and why?
Honestly, my favorite experience is what I'm doing now. I love working one-on-one with students and helping sort of figure out how each student learns and helping them use their strengths to overcome their challenges. I love coaching parents to better understand their children and support their children academically, and to understand how the social emotional development of adolescents impacts learning. And I love working with teachers to help them differentiate instruction and better meet the needs of a wide variety of learners in their classroom.
So it sounds like right now you have the whole scope of things, whereas before maybe you taught one group or one type of people and it was really hard to kind of do the full range, and now you've come full circle and you get to kind of do it all, which is a good thing in this case.
Yeah, it's more holistic, and I feel like I'm making a larger impact on student learning.
Right. Awesome. So when you were at Montessori, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because I know that it differs a lot from sort of a traditional teaching style.
Sure. So the Montessori method is very student-centered. There's a lot of hands-on activities. It's largely self-guided. The teacher is more of a facilitator than an instructor.
Okay.
And I embraced many aspects of the Montessori method in my classroom teaching as well. It's a little difficult to do within the constraints of sort of the schedules and structures of a traditional school, but I still think there's a lot of elements of the Montessori philosophy that you can use to infuse your lesson plans and your classroom environment.
So what types of things for example, what types of things do you infuse now? Like little things here and there from Montessori?
I think one of the aspects that I like is the focus on real life skills, making it relevant and meaningful to students, because that always creates higher engagement. So helping students understand that maybe we're working on something specific to a class they're taking now, but that it's a broader skill that they'll use way beyond, middle school or high school, and that will help them in life.
Right. So it's interesting. So it's almost like you teach them the skills as opposed to sort of the academics, and then the skills translate to the academics later.
Exactly.
Or like you said,
and just
your life.
Managing life skills, right?
Right. I think I maybe need to go to Montessori in order to pronounce your last name, for example. So you spent several years at Milton Academy right here in Milton. How did this experience influence your teaching style and strategies and that sort of thing?
Milton Academy was where I really honed my skills in differentiating instruction. It also gave me insight into how an academically rigorous environment and appropriate challenges can really help students thrive and excel. I also witnessed how smart, highly driven, very motivated students often struggle with perfectionism and anxiety, and that can actually have a big impact on executive functioning skills.
So would you say that at institutions that are so academically rigorous, like Milton Academy and so many others, would you say there is a higher case of anxiety and a little bit more perfectionism than at a regular school, or is it sort of across the board?
I think there can feel sort of more competitive and maybe a little bit more pressure, but I think honestly any student that's smart, driven to excel, motivated, has high standards for themselves in any environment really can struggle with some self-doubt around meeting those standards, and that translates to anxiety and sometimes some self-sabotage or a breakdown of the executive functioning skills, not knowing where to start because they're afraid that it might not be good enough.
So that would be something to look for, sort of if you have one of these kids that are super motivated, which is not a bad thing, but almost too perfectionistic. So a breakdown of executive functioning is more like they feel so overwhelmed that they can't
start.
Wow.
If they're working on an essay, they're kind of paralyzed because, what if it's not
perfect?
Right. What if I try really hard and it's not good enough? And then what if it's found out that I'm not smart or that I'm a fraud? What if this is all not true,
So what kinds of things do you do to help somebody who has that sort of anxiety? I mean, is it just go to yoga or deep breathing?
Honestly, having the student better understand that that's what's going on can be really helpful. A lot of students with that profile will procrastinate until the last minute, and they don't necessarily understand why, and they feel like maybe they're just lazy or undisciplined, or maybe that's how others perceive those habits.
Right.
And so helping a student understand that procrastination is actually sort of a tool they've developed to overcome this challenge, and to emphasize to them that being smart doesn't mean things come easily, And, it's a process, and it's okay for the first draft of an essay to be very rough. That's why it's called a rough draft. And, to put the good ideas and the bad ideas on the page, and that there's a process to filter and edit later. And so to, help them kind of push through that block, the more they understand themselves as a learner, they'll be able to apply those skills more effectively.
It's almost like a teaching adulting early, sort of like intro to adulting.
A lot of the parents I work with are, walking away from a session saying, I learned a lot about what I can do in my life from that. I
mean, I've already learned a lot just from that, so thank you. So with all of your collective teaching experience, and you have, it's all over, so it's so great because I feel like you have come from so many different perspectives, which is wonderful. What ultimately led you to do what you do now, which is consulting and tutoring and more one-on-one work?
The initial impetus for leaving full-time classroom teaching was to have a more flexible schedule. My son was very young at that point. And as I've grown my company, I've really loved, as we mentioned earlier, being able to have a more holistic approach to helping student learning, working with parents, with teachers, with schools, with libraries, in addition to with students. I get to engage in a wide variety of different activities and utilize different strengths I have, and I feel like I'm able to have a larger impact.
Right, because I mean, what you hear from traditional teachers a lot, who are, a third grade teacher, a fourth grade teacher, whatever, that they're sort of, they want to do more, but they're sort of constrained by time and everything, really. I mean, rules, time, resources. So it sounds like what you're able to do is get beyond that and kind of do everything, which is so beneficial to the student because they really get that tailored experience, which is incredible and awesome.
And working with parents has a huge impact on the student as well.
Right. So how much time do you spend working with the parents and the student? I mean, is it
depends on
probably
the
more
family.
than we think, right?
Often. It depends on the family. And it depends on sort of where the student is at. It's usually a little bit more intensive at the beginning as I kind of help coach them through, and understand where their student is at and, why they're struggling. And so it varies. And, as the student progresses, it fluctuates too. But parent coaching is a big piece of the tutoring. And every student that I tutor, there's a lot of touch points with the parents and also with their teachers to help them understand.
So when you first start, do you see any traditional, typical things that happen with parents, right from the get-go, where you're like, okay, well, this is my usual. I have to give this spiel because this parent does this thing. I mean, I'm a parent, so many of us are parents, right? So what are some things, right away where you're like, okay, 101, here it is.
One of the primary things I try to help parents understand is that even if their child is struggling to a degree that feels atypical, the types of challenges their child is facing are normal and that there's a developmental aspect to it, so the student who's very impulsive and, procrastinating, that a lot of that has to do with immaturity and, the frontal lobe development happens up through the age of 25. And so to help parents sort of take some deep breaths, understand that it's really normal and it's, part of child development. And, even if some of the struggles are unusual, that in the bigger picture, there's an evolution happening that takes time and that their child will get better, at these skills with some support and some time and maturity.
Yeah, and that must feel super comforting, I imagine, to a parent because, as a parent, we're all doing our best. We're all really trying really hard, but I think sometimes even we become perfectionistic about our parenting and how come my kid isn't able to do this? It must be my fault. So it must feel nice as a parent to hear, okay, let's just chill out. This is totally normal. It's still a kid, that we're dealing with. So,
and a lot of students are very resistant to their parents' help. And again, reassuring the parent that that's actually the job of an adolescent. Developmentally, that's what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be pushing back, developing more autonomy,
and this is how they're developing their lobes.
And, the fact that I could tell a child the same thing as their parent and they'll hear it better from me is normal. It's not personal. It's not that they don't like you or that you've done something wrong. It's really the job of the adolescent to move towards independence.
Right, exactly. It's so funny because it's sort of like, I don't know, even with adults, how sometimes if you get the third party to come in and be like, oh, you should do it this way, and all of a sudden the other adult's like, oh yeah, when you get a traditional consultant at a business even, it works out that way, which is, I think we're all sort of resistant, which is kind of hilarious. So what are some of the biggest educational problems you're seeing today in schools, kind of across the board issues?
I think one of the challenges for schools is in differentiating instruction to meet a wide variety of learning styles and to provide the scaffolding that a lot of students need to be able to really excel with large classrooms and a packed schedule.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to provide that kind of individualized instruction.
Right.
I think a lot of students also feel that what they're learning in their classes isn't very meaningful, isn't very relevant to their lives. And I think if that's something that shifts, there'll be much more engagement and interest from the students.
So when you tutor them, do you try to sort of nurture that? Like, here's how you may use this at some point in a way that's not that obvious? Is that like one of the things that you work on, and how do you do that?
Yeah, so especially if they're having a challenge with a particular teacher, for example,
Yes.
and they may feel like it's sort of a
Personal.
unique challenge, and this is something they just have to get through, and helping them understand that, adapting how you react and how you function based on a wide variety of different personalities is a life skill that's going to be really valuable to you. And it might feel very discouraging in the moment, but if you can figure out sort of how to change the way you're responding and the way you're reacting, that's a skill that you're going to unfortunately need.
So you teach
Your whole life.
resilience. You're teaching a lot of resilience, which is fantastic. Again,
And
that's
self-reflection.
Right.
If you can have insight into how it's impacting you and what you can do differently, even without that face-to-face interaction, when you go home, what can you do differently to help yourself if your needs aren't being met in the classroom?
Right.
There's other things that you can do on your own.
right. I mean, even advocacy, I imagine, like how it's the typical, like, I'm not, afraid to question, afraid to ask them to go over it again, because.
Or sometimes they'll meet with the teacher for extra help and then come back and say, I tried and it really wasn't helpful. And sometimes students don't know what to ask.
Yes.
And so helping them actually prepare for those meetings with a list of questions or a specific math problem they want to go over. Sometimes students don't even know what they can ask for. Ask for a graphic organizer to help you with your essay. Ask for an example of what a full credit paragraph response looks like. And so that's one strategy that can help students feel more comfortable asking for extra help, and then have that help session be more useful when they go home and are trying to follow that teacher's recommendations.
Right. Oh, that sounds amazing and so helpful and so translatable. So you and I have talked offline about this a little bit. What do you think about homework? What about homework today, especially at the elementary level? What are your thoughts?
It's tough because students' schedules are very full, and I think with sort of the academic content of first grade, there's this trickle-down effect, and so homework is kind of starting younger. And I think in some ways it helps students to continue thinking about the materials and the content throughout the day, throughout the weekend. And I think for some students there's some benefits to that. I think the amount of time that some students are spending on homework is a detriment to sort of the ability to relax and have some downtime. I think especially in the older grades there's a little bit more burnout.
Yeah.
Students who spend 7 hours in school and then 3 hours on homework really struggle with having enough time to just kind of relax and unwind.
What do you think is is there some kind of guide that there's a reasonable amount of time, this much per age? We hear these things sometimes. Is anything reasonable in your opinion? I mean, where do you stop?
It's tough, and each school has different, even each class, each teacher has different expectations.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's one of the things that can be hard for students is there's so much variety in terms of the amount from year to year, from teacher to teacher.
Absolutely. And the policies.
It's a tricky issue. There really isn't a quick solution, but there are ways to help students work more efficiently. A lot of students, say they're spending hours on their homework and, they're multitasking, and it's not the most efficient approach.
Right.
Or even if they're not doing that, they feel like they're struggling to maintain their focus and concentration for the duration of the homework time.
Well, especially if they've been working at school and concentrating all day.
Exactly.
And then they've got to come home, and like you said, when you want to have downtime, they're going back to work.
Yep.
Sort of like a lot of adults do, right?
But there are ways to break that up and make it feel a little bit more manageable for students too.
So what types of kids do you think need tutoring typically?
So some
Is
of
it
the
everyone?
students, well, everyone can benefit, absolutely.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Some of the students I work with come to me with a learning disability or an ADHD diagnosis, and certainly those kids benefit from tutoring. But a lot of the students I see are struggling academically for a variety of reasons, and maybe it seems that they're not working up to their potential. Maybe they feel like they're putting in a lot of time and effort and not really seeing the results that they want.
Right.
And for all of those students, my approach is very customized. I help them kind of understand their own learning profile, their own challenges, and come up with strategies that they can apply autonomously.
But it sounds like, I mean, even if someone didn't need something long-term, even just a little bit to give them those skills, the initial startup skills, kind of what you were talking about, to give them a little boost, and then maybe they'll get those, and then they're kind of on their merry way, and the rest of their academic career, they use those skills, and they're good. So it does sound like everyone could almost use a little boost.
Even adults breaking down a bigger project
Sounds
into
like it.
distinct steps. Yeah. There was one student I worked with, I think we had 3 sessions, and then she was launched and, you know, doing a great job on her own.
Which is fantastic, and that must feel very rewarding to you as well, to have, you know, see that kind of success and on your merry way and, you know, doing well going forward.
Absolutely.
So, do you have any quick educational tips for kids right now? 1 or 2 things that all of our kids could use right now to be able to manage their academic career a little bit more easily?
One simple tip I would have is to reduce the amount of different materials a child is keeping track of. A lot of students will have 1 binder per subject, and so then they have 5 or 6 binders to keep track of.
Which are heavy, also.
And then the likelihood of leaving one at home or leaving one at school is that much higher.
Yes.
So using 1 large binder with dividers to separate subjects, and then even getting a homework planner with hole punches that can be tucked into that binder just simplifies the number of things a student is trying to keep track of and
that
have
sounds
with
like
them.
a great
And having
idea.
everything in one place makes it easier for them at homework time.
Okay.
Another tip would be breaking up homework time or study time into shorter intervals.
Okay.
So instead of having homework stretch on for this, you know, seemingly endless stretch of time, to have students working in 15 to 30-minute chunks of time, having that be a highly focused, highly concentrated amount of time without distractions, and then even set a timer and schedule breaks in between, can help maintain focus. Making those breaks active, walking around, moving your body, even doing a few jumping jacks, you know, gets the blood flowing, improves concentration. Sometimes even switching subjects. So if the, you know, English reading feels long and your eyes are getting droopy, you know, work on it for 15 minutes, switch to math, and then come back. And even just kind of chunking the work like that can help a student stay more focused.
That sounds like a fantastic idea. Another one that we can use in our own lives too. I mean, we find with work, you know, sometimes you get onto a project and you're just making 0 progress because what you really need is a break.
Or you don't want to start because it feels overwhelming.
Yes.
And so if I say I'm setting a timer for 10 minutes, that's all you have to do, it feels more manageable. It's easier to get started.
I'm going to have to go home and set a timer on my work from now on. Well, so if people want to learn more about tutoring, learn more about consulting, maybe get this little, you know, boost in their academic career from you, how can they get in touch with you?
The best way to learn more about what I do is to visit my website, which is www.estutoring.com, and then from there you can get in touch with me directly too.
That sounds fantastic. So estutoring.com, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today, Eliza. For more quick tips and more information about Eliza, please visit us at www.broadappeal.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, we are back at Broad Appeal and we are taking a break, and we think you should take a break with us. If you remembered the bomb cyclone of 2018, we decided we would develop a drink to commemorate said bomb cyclone. So this is called a bomb cyclone. It's new and it's exclusive to Broad Appeal. So we're going to teach you how to make it today. So what we have here is an ounce of white rum, an ounce of coconut water, an ounce of coconut rum cream, and about a ½ ounce of blue curacao. So this is actually super easy to make, even though it has a ton of ingredients. So all we're going to do is pour everything in. So here we go with the rum. I'm gonna put these here because they're noisy. Here we go with the coconut water, the coconut rum cream, and the blue curacao. So we're gonna mix this up a bit. You can also shake it in a cocktail shaker and drink it straight. But for today, we are going to drink it on the rocks. There's a little bit of ice. And here we go. This is perfect when you are snowed in during a bomb cyclone. Let's give it a try. That's delicious and crunchy. This is the perfect drink for you to enjoy during the next bomb cyclone, which hopefully we won't have. For more drinks and recipes, visit us at broad-appeal.com.
And thank you so much for watching today.
Hi everybody, we are back with Eliza from ES Tutoring, and she's going to give us a quick word of wisdom, a quick tip that makes her life easier, that will hopefully make our lives a little bit easier as well. So what's your favorite business, life organizing, anything tip for us today?
It might seem very simple, but using Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Calendar, Gmail is a lifesaver for me because everything is in one place.
Yeah.
All of my documents are online, so I can access them. Even my presentations, I can access them from any computer, and it just makes it easy to stay organized.
Yeah.
Same tips I give my students about trying to streamline and have everything in one place, using Google Docs.
It's like your binder.
Exactly.
It's your virtual binder. So.
And then sharing documents with students and parents is very simple. Even editing a document at the same time with students is very easy with Google Docs. So
fantastic. Google Docs, everybody. Get your Google Docs. So thank you, everybody, again for joining us today. Please visit us at www.broad-appeal.com for more tips, words of wisdom, and to learn more about our guests. Thank you.